I'll tell you the work that I did with the Army. I worked with them for 10 years, and I worked with people from the highest levels, from generals right on down to privates. And I am a big proponent of starting the cultural change at the top. I think that it's really, really hard to change the culture of an organization in a grassroots kind of way, from a bottom up way. But I don't think it's impossible. And I think that where it starts really is the individual employees, and it can just be an employee. Truly, I mean, I guess it could theoretically. It's better when there are a couple of them that kind of band together. Like, man, this sucks. Well, what do you want? Well, here's what I want. I want that too. And they recognize that. They have that conversation. They identify what ideal looks like, what right looks like to them, and then they live it. And truly, I don't know. They don't have the power to talk. They don't have the power to proclaim. They don't have the power to.
Welcome to They're Not Like Us, the podcast where bold ideas and inspiring stories come to life. I'm your host, Aaron, here to challenge the norms and ignite your potential. If you're ready to level up, don't forget to subscribe and join the movement. Now, let's dive in. Hello, welcome back to They're Not Like Us. I'm your host, Aaron, and today I'm joined by Dr. Brian Hite. Is that pronounced correctly, Brian?
Yep, you got it.
Yeah, cool. Welcome to the show, Brian.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Oh, the pleasure's mine. Can you tell people a little bit about yourself, please?
Oh, Lord have mercy. I've been on the planet for half a century. I don't know where to start with that one. I guess right now I live in Nashville, Tennessee. I have a fiance. I've got 3 kids, 2 stepsons and a daughter who's 11. Youngest boy's 9, oldest boy's 12. And I do a lot of things. I have a business. It's called Brian Hite Global. I do some keynote speaking. I've written a book. I'm working on another book. I have some programs that I do, some coaching programs that will eventually also be online courses. The programs are motivation, performing with pressure, and a 4-phased approach to peak superior performance. So that's what I have through that business. I'm also a stuntman. I've been doing that for 30 years. And still going. As long as the people keep hiring me, I want to keep doing it. It's a lot of fun. And and I'm also a faculty member at Grand Canyon University. So I work with doctoral students out there, typically in performance psychology doctoral program, but sometimes I'll get the general psychology or organizational psychology programs as well.
Yeah, you've got quite a diverse background there. I'm quite interested in the stuntman side of things. How did you get into that?
Well, I'll tell you, I was going to college, and I went to college just because that's what I was supposed to do. I don't know. You go to high school, and then you graduate, and you go to college, but I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. I kept trying to find out through the first 2 years of college, and I came up with nothing. But then a friend of mine was the company manager of a Batman stunt show at Six Flags in New Jersey, where I was going to college. And he got me some tickets to the show. I went and saw it. And from the minute it started, I was hooked. It was this big explosion went off and motorcycles came jumping out of this thing. And I was mesmerized for the next 20 minutes. And afterward, I was able to go backstage because it was a friend who was the running the show. And I was able to ask the performers, how do you get this job? I couldn't even believe it was a job. I couldn't even believe people were being paid to do what I was watching. It just looked like so much fun. And they said, well, you got to know how to do fights and high falls and motorcycles, none of which I knew how to do at that time. So I linked up with one of the people in the show who taught me how to do fights and high falls. And I bought a dirt bike and went out and just sort of taught myself how to do some slides and wheelies and jumps and things like that. Went to the audition, got the job, did that job the next summer. And then that's it. That was it. I couldn't, that was what I wanted to do. But then I still had one more year of college left, but I couldn't focus. My senior year, I almost failed. I came very, very close to failing my first semester, but the second semester I was definitely failing. So I had to just drop out, and that's what I did. I dropped out of school with 1 semester to go. I did the show one more summer in New Jersey, and then I moved out to LA, where I also did the show. They had the same show at a Six Flags out there, which was very fortunate for me. But that's where I started to get into the film and TV work. And really, that's just a process of meeting people and working on shows. And it's just word of mouth. You work on some stuff, people talk about you, meet other people give you a chance. And I just kind of moved on from there. So like I said, that was 30 years ago, and still doing it.
Yeah, man, that's what's wild. I don't think I've ever met anybody else who does it. It's it must be dangerous though, right? You must pick up some like injuries and stuff through doing it.
It varies. Sometimes it is. I mean, I've been hit by cars, and that's dangerous. I have a job coming up in a week, or I guess it's a week and a half or so, on a TV show called The Cleaning Lady, and I'm going to be doing a fight up on a sailboat that's on a trailer, and get knocked off and fall and clip a picnic table and go to the ground. So that's another one that will hurt. But last week I worked on a TV show, and I just sat in a nice, warm, comfortable car the whole time, just driving down the road. So, you never know what kind of jobs you're going to get. Sometimes they're ones that you're going to feel the next day for sure, and then there are others that are they're a whole lot easier.
Yeah, man, it sounds pretty interesting and like quite diverse because you do different stuff all the time, I suppose. So it's quite good from that sense. How was that kind of element that of your background being a stuntman? How has that kind of shaped your perspective, especially when it comes to like kind of dealing with pressure or performance? Because you've got to, you don't have unlimited takes, right? You have to get it right.
Yeah, well, sometimes you get one because, you're smashing something or crashing something, breaking something, and they got one of those things, whatever it is, be it a car or a motorcycle or something that they built. So yeah, it's interesting that you asked that. It's something that has, at least my perspective on performance, especially consistent, sustained high level performance, on motivation, on pressure, attention, and how to stay focused. These are all things that have continued to change throughout my career. When I was 20, I thought about it one way. And as I've progressed with a little bit more experience, and then I started to go to college, I got my master's degree in sports psychology, because I did end up going back to college to finish my bachelor's. And then I got my master's in sports psychology and a PhD in organizational psychology, which is essentially performance psychology for businesses. Just how do you create conditions for people to be at their best every day? And so through that learning, I was able to immediately apply. That was kind of the fun thing, was that I was immediately able to apply those things that I was learning in those different programs to my work as a stuntman. So when I learned about motivation, for example, and the things that made it go up and down, I was able to start becoming more aware of what those factors were in my life and how they were playing out, and really starting to notice more when I was very motivated and when I wasn't. Same thing with pressure and attention. When I would get distracted, what was going on? I became a lot more aware of those things, and I had the tools to not only get my attention back when I got distracted, but to limit the amount of distractions that I had. So it's really been a really an interesting experience, taking the academic side of the sport performance psychology thing and being able to apply it immediately to my job. So but it has changed. My perspective on pressure, for example. When I first started in stunts, I would feel pressure very regularly. And because I was so worried about what people were going to think of me, where I was going to get my next job, if I screwed up, the ramifications of that, or if I did really well, the ramifications of that, of having people notice and being able to hire me on other shows, and so on and so forth. And then as I got a little bit more experienced and got to know more people, and became more comfortable in just how the business worked, it was easier for me to keep my focus in the moment, to keep my focus in the present, on the things that I really needed to do in each situation in order to set conditions for success, in order to make it more likely that the outcome will be what I wanted it to be. And that's really the difference in pressure. When you're talking about pressure, pressure exists. There's no such thing as a pressure situation. Those don't exist. And what I mean by that is there's no situation that will always reliably be one that causes people to feel pressure across the board. I'll give you an example. There was a show that I was working on. It was about 20 years ago. I was in the back of this truck, and we were driving down the road, and we were doing a fight in the back of the truck, and the truck was going, I don't know, maybe 15 miles an hour. And at one point, I'm come out the back of the truck like I'd been thrown, hit the ground, and roll. Before that stunt, before I got in the truck even, I was feeling an extreme amount of pressure. And it was because I was focused on the wrong thing. There were so many big time stunt guys. I mean, stunt coordinators who were running huge shows, who had done some of the most notable stunts in Hollywood at that point. They were standing off to the side watching me for whatever reason. They happened to be there that day. And the stunt coordinator was a friend of mine, and I wanted to make him look good. And I didn't, so if I screwed up, that would not happen. So there was a lot of pressure that I felt before and while I was in the truck, while we were even driving down the road. Well, cut to a month ago, I was working on another TV show called Righteous Gemstones. And it was the same thing. I was in the back of the truck. We were driving down this road. The truck hits a bump. The back of the truck pops open. I come flying out the back, hit the ground and roll. But I felt no pressure before or during the action that was happening with that truck. None, not even a little bit. I was just hanging out, talking to the other stunt guy who was in there. I was talking to the actor. And then once they said, okay, we're ready to go, my attention immediately focused on what I needed to do. I had my arms tied together with rope, so it was kind of awkward to get myself into a position. But there was a position that I knew I needed to be in because I'd found it during the rehearsal. So I found that position. I got my hand where it needed to be to pull the latch, and my eyes focused on the flag that I needed to see that told me where the bump was, so that when I would pull the latch, everything just fell into place in that present moment. And as a result, I felt no pressure. So my point in saying that there's no such thing as a pressure situation, I mean, if there were such a thing as a pressure situation, one would think that coming out the back of a moving truck and hitting the ground and rolling would probably be one of those situations. And it was in one situation, but it wasn't in the other. So again, that begs the question, well, why? And the answer is because in the one case, my attention was in the future. It was on the possible consequences of results. If it goes well, then. If it goes badly, then. That's where my mind was. It was not at all in the moment on those things I needed to do. Whereas for the performance where I didn't feel pressure, I was completely focused. I was in what I call the bubble. In the literature, it's called flow or the zone. People have heard of it, in a lot of ways. I think of it as a bubble because I'm just in this place. There's nothing affecting me but what's in my immediate environment that I can control and that I need to attend to in order for success to be more likely to happen.
Yeah, I think it's key how we frame things as well. So I did a little bit of research before the show and looked into, I found a Harvard study, and they found that when they did it with the test subjects, if they reframed it as a stressful situation as a challenge versus a difficult, stressful situation, then performance went up by 30%. So it's how we frame it in our mind is crucial to it, right?
Yeah, and that's important, but even then we can experience pressure. So what I mean by that is, yes, if we look at something as a threat, that puts us in a bad place. A lot of anxiety starts happening, a lot of stress starts happening, our attention goes haywire, muscle tension can start to go haywire. Lots of stuff happens that can prevent us from performing to our full potential. However, even if we reframe that as this is an opportunity, which is a great thing to do, it will it will change the emotions that we experience, and it will make those emotions more productive, and it will reduce the amount of pressure that we feel, possibly. But we can still have problems with that because, again, if I'm thinking about the situation as an opportunity, well, why is it an opportunity? So taking, for example, the first stunt that I was telling you about, my mind was going back and forth between both. I was perceiving it as a threat. I don't want to screw up. I don't want to make the stunt coordinator look bad. I don't want to look bad in front of these other stunt coordinators. I don't want to get hurt and be carted off. And the flip side of that was, man, if I hit this, if I nail it, these guys are all watching. My ticket's punched. I'm going to be on the next big movie. I'm going to have a bunch of money. This is a huge opportunity for me. Each way, the emotions shift, but my attention is still in the wrong place. Because in order to perform well, I have to pay attention to those things that I need to do in the moment. That's critical. So yes, if we reframe performance from a threat to an opportunity, emotions will change, our physiology will change, and we are going to probably put ourselves in a much better position to perform well. However, we're still not going to be able to perform to our potential if our attention stays on those consequences, on those outcomes, those things that truly aren't even real because they exist in the future. They're not real yet. Now there may be a high probability that they will become real, but they aren't yet. So where our attention needs to be is on what is real, which is what's now.
Yeah, and it's about kind of focusing on what we can control, right? Because, the outcome, we could have that could have been the perfect stunt and been immaculate and still not had the outcome that you wanted, because that still depends on opinion and other people to, move some things around. But what you could control were the details and the elements in that moment that you had to complete, right?
Yeah, and for example, in the very first one, we were just driving on a smooth road. There wasn't a bump. So what could have happened is I could have had my body in exactly the right place, my mind in exactly the right place, thinking exactly what I should have thought, taken off exactly how I was going to take off. But right as I was taking off, the truck hit a bump and threw me off. And I ended up coming out weird and wrecking and hurting myself. That could have happened. And because, like you said, the outcome itself, there are only so many things that we can control. The outcome itself is determined by other people. It's determined by our environment, things that truly do exist outside our control. So we have to be aware of, number one, what is in our control? And number two, of those things that are in our control, which is the most important at any given moment for us to attend to? Where should our focus be? And let that outcome take care of itself. There's a book by I'm forgetting the coach's name, real famous San Francisco 49ers American football coach. I can't believe it. He's an amazing coach. But it was let the outcome take care of itself, or something like that is the name of the book. Because that's what happens if we focus on, because how does the future become real? How does it manifest? Well, the future depends on what we do right now. What we do in this moment is what will determine the future. But right now, the future is just imaginary. So if we have an idea of what we think we'd like the future to look like, well, forward into the future is not the place for our attention. Right now is the place for our attention, because that's where the actions are going to take place that will either allow that future that we've imagined to manifest or not.
Yeah, and this is anecdotal, really, but from my experience, when I'm in the moment and I'm concentrating on what I need to do, I'm not thinking about all the other stuff, which then actually keeps me emotionally regulated, because it's the future stuff that gets you all emotional and worried or excited or whatever it may be. Whereas in the moment, if you're just concentrating on the task at hand, if you will, you don't get that same kind of spike in emotion.
No, yeah, anxiety, that is something, worry, those things exist in the future. If that's something that that was honestly, it was one of the things that I learned in school that I was able to immediately apply in stunts, that for me became a red flag. It became an indicator. If I noticed that I was feeling anxious or I was feeling worried, then I knew that my mind was in the future. I was imagining things. And again, it's not that those things may not be probable, and I'm not saying that they're not important. I mean, I've worked with the U.S. Army and with soldiers who regularly, when they were going to combat, were in situations where the consequences mattered. As a stuntman, I've been in situations where if I did badly, if I messed up, then either I or somebody I'm working with may not go home, at least not in the same condition we showed up, which is what we want. So I'm not trying to diminish the consequences or the importance of the outcome. But what I am saying is that, especially when that outcome and those consequences are so important, we have to let them go. And we have to put our attention in the moment and trust that what we're doing now will set as good a conditions as we can possibly set for that outcome to happen that we've identified.
Yeah. How do we translate that into kind of leadership and organizational structures then? How do we take that from that lesson that we've learned from, you know, your theoretical background and then applied in, stunt work and stuff like that? How do you then
Yeah.
apply that into leadership and organizations?
Well, it's interesting because I do that. I work as a consultant for organizations as well, and I get brought in by leadership from the CEO level down through mid-management. It depends on the size of the organization. but I get kind of that same question, and it really becomes it becomes, usually, not always, because every organization is different, but a, a, a reimagining of what the objectives are, of what's really important, and what we're going to put our attention on, and what we're going to measure. Because what happens is a lot of organizations will set goals for the year, for the 6 months, for a month, whatever it might be, and then every meeting and every discussion is around where we are in relation to that goal. Whereas if we can identify where we want to go, and that goals are fine for that. I mean, goals are great to set an idea of, okay, I want to be over there. And then the next thing is, okay, well, where am I right now? So I got to know where I'm going, and I got to know where I am. And once I know those two things, then I can create a plan to get from where I am to where I'm going to go. But once I've set that plan in motion, then I need to focus on just the things every single day that need to get done, and just let the goal go. Check in every now and then to see, okay, well, are we getting closer? Are we not? Do we need to shift or move or change the plan? But we can't fixate on that goal, and we can't define success solely in terms of that goal. We have to focus on the process itself, and determine ways to measure success in ways that are part of that journey, part of that process. So part of the work that I do with those organizations is again, just trying to figure out, okay, well, what are your goals? What have you set? Where are you trying to get to? And what are your values? What are the things that you care about? So it's not just about the behaviors themselves. Those behaviors should be indicative of something. They should be representative of something larger. And the goal itself should emerge from the values of the organization. So what is the culture like? What does the organization stand for? And once we get a feel for all of that, then we can align the goals, we can align the daily behaviors, all of that with that overall cultural value-based system that the organization should have. Because that's where we can start to evaluate, okay, so today we have this goal, and that goal comes from this value. Today we're taking these actions, or today we took these actions and they didn't work. Okay, well, but what did we do? Well, we did this, this, and that. Okay, well, are those behaviors aligned with the values? Did we, even though we didn't do something that worked, that really moved us in the direction we want to go, were those behaviors at least coming from the right place? Because if we can keep that larger picture, worry less about the eaches, the objects, the daily goals, whatever, and really ground our actions, ground our thought processes in those bigger, well, here's how I want to be. Here's how we want to move forward. Here are the values that we want to embody every single day. That's where the focus tends to be best. And it helps people come together. It helps create a rapport and camaraderie and connectedness among employees, because everybody knows where they're trying to go, and most importantly, why they're trying to go there, because the goal emerges directly from that value system.
Yeah, that's important. That's something I've spoke about a lot recently as well, actually, is the finding your why, having that purpose identified rather than kind of aimlessly just trying to survive and get through the day, especially at work. If you know why you're doing something, and you know, kind of like you say, the values of which you're trying to operate, you can, I think it gives us a bit more purpose. So then, we want to drive forward. We want to do a bit more because we see the bigger picture. And in their moments when we may have difficult tasks or stuff lots that we need to do, we kind of, we're not focusing on the future, but we kind of have sight of that future. So it keeps us focused on the actual task, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. I think of it in terms of top down versus bottom up. Now, if you're in a transactional leadership style, if that's what your organization has, what that means is that it's, if you do this, then we give you a cookie, or you get a reward, or you get promoted, or whatever it is. So there are specific behaviors, specific protocols, specific things that everybody knows that these are what's supposed to happen. And it's the behaviors themselves that matter. When they happen, that's good. That's defined as good. When they lead to, whatever the objective is, that's success. So that's a transactional leadership style. But there isn't really necessarily a an overarching value that's defining those different behaviors. Really good is determined by, did you do this? If so, I'm giving you that. Whereas transformational leadership styles, authentic leadership styles, servant leadership styles, these are more grounded in, okay, we as a whole, we as a group, we as an organization, all are moving toward this one thing. And every day we need to figure out how to do that. Now, I don't know if it's going to be by doing this or by doing this or by doing that. That's something I'm leaning on you guys for. And I'm here to help. I'm here to support, and to give you my experience, whatever I can do. But I don't know what the exact answer is. I do know where we're going and why we're going there. And I need you to know where we're going and, most importantly, why we're going there. Because if you understand that and you've bought into it and you believe in the importance of it, well, now I can trust as a leader that you are likely to make the right decision. It's like, when governments try to write, you can't write a law for every single thing. You can't do it. You have to have some values that go beyond that. They go above, so that people, so that if there's not a specific law written for a specific thing, people are still doing what needs to be done in order for society to function the way that it needs to. It's the same thing in organizations. We can't define every single action an employee needs to take, and we don't need to if we have a clear vision of, number one, where we're going, and number two, why we're trying to get there.
Yeah, I think it is crucial, and I think it's something that's missing in a lot of workplaces from my personal experience, is that they're kind of, I mean, a lot of people have a vision statement, or, they'll have a token values thing written down somewhere, but, it's different, isn't it? Having it kind of written down on a piece of paper, just paying a lip service, and then actually embodying it and living that way, and leading by example, essentially, for other people who are new into the organization, to keep that culture growing and cultivate it in the way that you want.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I've done quite a bit as a consultant when I come into organizations, is some of that culture development. And we talk about, okay, together as a group, and depends on the size of the organization as to how many people in the room, but I try to get a representative sample, meaning some people from the ground floor right up to the C-suite in the room, and everybody has a voice in, what are we trying to achieve? How are we trying to go? Let's talk about, why we're doing what we're doing and for whom, and so on and so forth, and really create that vision and create that mission statement that makes it clear what direction we're going every single day. And then once we have and all of that starts with values. So what are the values that we want to embody as an organization? Well, once we have the values identified, now we can create the vision. Now we can create the mission, because all of those can be aligned. The values are what the vision comes from, and the mission is what the vision comes from. So they're all aligned. And then it's the next part that I think is probably the most important, that I think not a lot of companies actually make it to this level. And that is, what are the behaviors that I should regularly see that let me know that these values are being lived out, that this mission statement is a part of what it is that's going on. And the way that I put it to them is like, okay, so let's say I showed up in your workplace and I just followed everybody around. What would I see, or what would I not see, that would let me know that this particular value is being lived out? What would I hear? So, and that really turns their attention to where the rubber meets the road, the daily, here's what we are doing. And we identify those behaviors, and then we identify, okay, so how do we keep ourselves accountable? How do we check in? And not accountable from the standpoint of, oh, you did that, so now you get punished. It's not, again, we don't want to turn it into a transactional thing, but we do want to be aware of when the values are being lived out, and the types of situations maybe where the values are more easily adopted or embodied, and maybe some situations where they're not. For example, maybe there are certain types of meetings, or maybe there are certain interactions with some clients, not other clients, that the values are lived out more than others. Those types of things are important to recognize, but they can't be recognized unless we keep those values and that mission and vision top of mind. And that's really something that is a challenging thing to do on a daily basis, but it becomes a whole lot easier once leaders, once they really commit to it. And what I mean by that is, it's just like thinking is just like any other habit. It really is. Any behavioral habit, good or bad, that we've adopted, it's come over time. Our brain has rewired itself to make this behavior happen automatically. Well, thinking styles are the same thing. You mentioned earlier perceiving a threat versus an opportunity. Well, training our minds to go into challenging situations and thinking of them as a challenging situation, an opportunity, rather than a threat where something bad might happen. That takes practice, and we can actually train our minds to perceive things differently. Well, it's the same thing in the organizations. If we keep those values and those mission statements top of mind, and we really look intently, we train ourselves to view behavior and interactions through the lens of those values and those statements, well, then we start to pick up on those things a whole lot easier. It doesn't take as much effort. It comes automatically. We start noticing when those values start to wane or when they're really being embodied well. And we want to recognize both as leaders. We don't want to just see what's wrong and how to fix it. We want to look at what's right, recognize it, and make sure that we keep it.
Brian, what if you go to an organization and it's relatively toxic, and a lot of that toxic behavior comes from above at the top? How can the people at the bottom kind of try to improve the culture from that sense? Because everybody talks about culture from that top-down perspective. However, they don't always have control over that, and a lot of people are in that lower level who are struggling, who want to improve the culture but don't know how.
Yeah. Well, it is a hard thing. I'll tell you, the work that I did with the Army, I worked with them for 10 years, and I worked with people from the highest levels, from generals right on down to privates. And I am a big proponent of starting the cultural change at the top. I think that it's really, really hard to change the culture of an organization in a grassroots kind of way, from a bottom-up way. But I don't think it's impossible. And I think that where it starts really is the individual employees. And it can just be an employee, truly. I guess it could, theoretically. It's better when there are a couple of them that kind of band together, like, man, this sucks. Well, what do you want? Well, here's what I want. I want that too. And they recognize that. They have that conversation. They identify what ideal looks like, what right looks like to them. And then they live it. And truly, I don't know, they don't have the power to talk. They don't have the power to proclaim. They don't have the power to set rules or directions. But they do have the power to live, to act, to behave in ways that are aligned with how they would like to see the organization work. And really being aware of limiting the reactions, the knee-jerk type of reactions that can come when they notice something working in a way that they don't want it to. They take a breath, they settle in, and they take that action, the behavior that fits with their vision of what the organization is. And what happens, quite frankly, is that it's like a contagion. There's something that's very clear in the literature that's emotional contagion. If you're a leader and you're listening to this, it's kind of a fun exercise to try out. The next time you have a meeting with your people, walk in all, just down and shoulders drooped and poopy faced and just take a bad attitude and see how long it takes for their body language and their tone of voice to match yours. And then, wait a little bit, wait a couple days or whatever, maybe a week, and then come in just intentionally up, smiling, eye contact, shoulders back, back straight, and keep that body language and the tone intentionally that way. And notice how long it takes for them to adopt that, with the smiles and the relaxing. It's a real thing. And like I said, it's a real easy thing to try out. It happens very quickly. So give that a shot. But it's the same thing at the lower levels. So when the employees are really, when they're embodying, living out the values that they want, it becomes contagious. When somebody doesn't get, if somebody is, you mentioned a toxic environment, if that involves people yelling at each other or a lot of criticism, when that particular employee who's decided he or she wants things to be different gets criticized, they smile, they say, thank you for the feedback. I appreciate that. I'm going to do the best that I can. And that will throw the other person for a loop, for sure. But over time, and it won't change anything the first time or even the second, maybe even the third. But over time, and this does take a long time, which is why it's challenging, over time, that it will grow. And it will be, and you'll notice in one little department of maybe 6 to 8 people, and then that department interacts with some other departments, and all of a sudden now there's a different level of demeanor, a different level of well-being, a different level of happiness at the job, and really purpose behind the job. So that would be my answer to your question of, can it happen from the lower levels up? It can. It's certainly challenging, but it can, and that's how it would happen if it did.
I love that, and I think it's obvious because I say it's obvious, but I mean how we behave impacts other people, because we've all experienced it. Somebody comes in a foul mood, and we're instantly kind of put off, and it kind of ruins the entire mood in the room. If there's if there's 8 of you in there or whatever, we kind of all ruin the mood. Nobody knows what to say. It becomes a bit disheveled. Whereas if somebody comes in a really good mood, it picks everybody up. Everybody starts talking to each other, and it does completely change the atmosphere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and even the lowest level leader, and by that I mean not even necessarily an official leader, but an unofficial leader. Those exist too. Those people who aren't necessarily in, on paper, leadership roles, but they're well respected by those around them, and people listen to them. Those are people who really can make a big difference at those lower levels. But when they do, one of the things that along with behavioral changes, the way that those behavioral changes become most consistent and most helpful is when, again, like I said, it's not different, when they're connected to identified, very clear values. So if the employees at the bottom recognize we value respect, we value integrity, we value hard work, these are things that they can identify for themselves and talk about. In other words, instead of complaining about how bad everybody is, you can talk about the behavior of other people in terms of those values. I wish that this behavior were different in this way. I'm feeling disrespected, and here's why. The boss is coming over and doesn't even make eye contact with me and just demands stuff and walks away. Okay, well, what might that look like? If that were to switch, what does respectful look like? And talking to each other about that, and then you can see it. You'll see that respectful talk. We'll have some eye contact. I will ask you some questions. I will actually listen to you and what you have to say. These are things that can demonstrate respect. So, but again, it can happen at that grassroots level, but it can happen a whole lot easier if they, again, talk about the values. What do we care about? What do we want to be different? And what does that look like?
I think that's a big part of it. I think a lot of people don't spend the time to think about that and to verbalize it. They kind of intrinsically know they're not happy with something or with the way something's going, but they still don't take the time to think, how do I want it to be? How do I, and putting that into kind of, not necessarily into writing, but into words that they can speak to themselves and they can speak to other people, so that people can kind of band together and go, yeah, I want that value as well. And we can kind of start snowballing really and working forward to create that. A lot of people just focus on the negative and just go, oh, I don't like this, I hate this is making me unhappy, and not what the alternative is, what the alternative that they want.
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, a couple things really. Yes, we can't just stop with this is bad. It's all right, this is bad because, and here's what good would look like, and here's how we get there. We have to take those extra steps. And sometimes, yeah, identifying what we really want, or really becoming aware of what's happening that we like, that we don't like, the values we really do want to embody. I mean, we all have core values and core beliefs that we walk around with every day. Even taking the time to identify those, it can be challenging because it does take time. And the way that I think about it is this: it's like spending time. It's an investment, is the way that I look at it. It's spending time up front so that you can spend less time in the middle of and on the back end trying to fix or trying to figure out. If we can actually take some preparation time in the front end, things go better during and after. And that's actually one of the things with the 4-phased approach to performance that I was talking about, that is one of the programs that I offer. That's kind of a big part of it. There's a before phase of performance. Every performance, no matter what you're talking about, has a before. And it's in that before. The four phases, by the way, are before, right before, during, and after. So before, during, and after, those have been talked about a lot. But that right before, this is something that emerged out of my stunt work. It's something that I realized when I show up on set and we've done the rehearsals and I know exactly what we're going to do, but we're kind of hanging out waiting to do it. I can't just go to my regular, I don't know, out of work self way of being. I have to stay kind of in the moment. I have to continue to stretch. I have to rehearse in my mind a little bit. There are some things I need to do in order to stay prepared. But I can't stay at the full performance level of energy and engagement and attention because that'll wear me out. There's just no way to do that. I might be on set for 12, 14 hours. So I can't sustain that. So there's a time when there's a before where we're doing some preparation, we're getting ourselves ready, we're keeping ourselves in the right kind of state. And then there's the right before where we transition into, okay, no, it's happening now. It's not actually happening, but it's about to happen. It's imminent. Things are about to go. And I need to transition from where I am to that performance state. I need to get my energy activation level where it needs to be. I need to get my attention where it needs to be. I need to manage and regulate my emotions. I need to make sure I'm communicating with those around me in an effective way that allows for the performance to move forward. Because it's not, when we perform, it's rare that we're doing it on our own completely. Sometimes that's the case, but usually there are others involved. So part of that right before is, okay, well, are all the ducks in a row for everybody? Are we all speaking the same language and on the same page about what's about to happen? So there's a right before where we really get into that performance state and be ready to go. And then, whatever your version of action is, on the film set, when they call action, now I'm going, whatever your version of that is, now we're in the middle of the performance. Now we're executing. And then once we're done, then we move into phase 4, which is a recovery phase, where two things happen. One is we recover. We've just expended energy for however long we've done it through this performance process, and we need to recover some of that energy. How are we going to do that most efficiently? And that's important for a few reasons. One is just recovery is important. The other is often, depending on the type of performance we're talking about, we may need to do it again pretty quickly. So we have to reset, we have to recock, we have to get that energy back, get reset, refocused to perform again. So that's one thing. But then the second thing is, in that recovery phase, is how do I learn from what happened? How can I become better from what just happened? What went right and what went wrong? What went right that I can keep? Why did it go right? How can I sustain it? And what didn't go right? What went wrong? What can be improved and how can I improve it? Both are important. And my recommendation, at least to the clients that I work with, is do the first one first. Recover, take a minute, let your emotions come back down, let your physiology return to, a regular walking around level. Because what happens is sometimes in the performance, whatever it might be, we get all heightened emotions and heightened energy activation levels. And our minds, sometimes they don't process information quite as well as they could. And if we finish a performance, particularly if it went well, then we're on a high, and we're in this place of, oh, it's all great. Or if it went badly, we may be very frustrated, very angry. And there's a strong emotional component to our cognition. We're not able to think straight. If we were to ask ourselves in those moments, what went right, what went wrong, very analytically trying to figure out, okay, well, what are the things I'm going to keep? What am I going to fix? We're not going to be as accurate and we're not going to be as thorough in our assessment. So taking a second to recover and then transitioning into some strategies for identifying what those things are that we can keep and improve to move forward. That's phase 4. So those are the 4 phases of performance. And the reason I brought it up in terms of what you're talking about is because that before phase is so critical with regard to what you're talking about.
Yeah, that just before phase as well would give me some awful flashbacks. I used to box and did a bit of MMA, and I always used to struggle with that. That the prep, the before, generally very good. Once you get to the arena or wherever it is that you're fighting, that nervous energy that you've got, and then you need to kind of warm up and prepare physically without expending too much energy. But then you've got this nerves and excitement, if you will, before going in. I used to really, really struggle with that, with what to do with myself kind of backstage when you're there for an hour or two, when you're waiting to actually be called. that used to destroy me mentally. That.
Yeah, well, and it's the same thing for people, you know, if you're leading a meeting. Some people enjoy leading meetings, some people don't. Some people enjoy leading some meetings with some people, but they don't enjoy leading meetings with other people. Maybe it's a presentation that you're giving, and this could even just be in personal life. This could be a challenging conversation that we need to have with a spouse, or disciplining a kid. These are all performances that really they require us to be present. There are better and worse ways of doing them. And if we think about those things in terms of those 4 phases, what do I need to do before in order to ensure that I'm prepared physically, mentally, emotionally, and socially for what's about to happen? And then, okay, we're going to have this conversation. It's right before it's about to go. How do I make sure that my everything is ready for that, and my mind is where it needs to be? I've got my bubble created. I'm present. During, what are some of the things that I might encounter? What are some of the things that might get said, or some of the challenges that may come up? And how will I handle those in that moment? I've practiced that. I've thought about that. And I know exactly where I'm trying to go. I know exactly what I'm trying to get to. And then afterward, having a plan, you know, trying to go from a challenging conversation with a spouse right into driving a kid to soccer practice, that's not a good place to be. So if you can time the conversation in a way that allows for at least a little bit of time to regulate, to shift. And one of the things that I can tell you, excuse me, that one of the things that soldiers did when I worked with them, when they were transitioning from work to home, there were more than a few who would tell me that either in their car at work, they would get in their car, you know, on the army post when they were finished, they'd get in their car and they would just sit there, sometimes in silence, sometimes with music, sometimes just staring at a phone, watching a video. But whatever it was, they were doing something that was helping them transition their minds, their bodies, everything, themselves, from work to home. Sometimes they would do it there. Other times they would get in their car, they'd start driving, and when they'd get home, they'd park in the driveway, or they would park in the garage, and then they'd take 5 to 10 minutes just sitting there to make the transition, so that when they walked in the house, they were able to be present. They weren't carrying with them any of the baggage from their previous activities and previous engagements. So again, this 4-phased approach can be applied to literally anything that we're doing, because usually the things that we're doing, we can do better or we can do worse. And anything that we can do better or we can do worse, that's something that will benefit from this phased thought process.
I like that. I think that 5-10 minutes as well makes a huge difference. If you've
certainly can,
been,
yeah.
If you've been stressed at work all day and you come home and then you just go straight into into your home, and maybe you've got dogs and a family, and you know it's a stressful environment anyway, and you've not given yourself that kind of, and that's all it can take sometimes is 5 minutes just to kind of decompress. You know, maybe take some breaths and just bring yourself, like you say, watch a video or whatever it is that works for you, just to bring your mind back to center before you then go and switch up to family life, essentially.
Yeah. And that's a process that if you learn the tools and you practice the tools, the amount of time it takes to make that switch gets reduced dramatically. So for example, there have been times when I've been on set and I'm standing around, I'm waiting for him to call action. Something happened with whatever it was. We thought we were ready to go, but we really weren't ready to go. So I was just standing around, and I got out of my bubble. I got out of the place where I was ready to execute. And then out of nowhere, they go, all right, we're going. All right, everybody get ready and roll cameras. And so immediately, like I had to get into that place very quickly. But if you practice the skills enough, it really, just one breath, maybe a physiological, I squeeze my fist. That's one thing I do. I'll take a breath in, I'll squeeze the fist really tight, and I'll let it out. It's a progressive muscle relaxation. I don't know if anybody's familiar with that, but it's where you tighten up individual muscle groups while you breathe. You tighten up, for example, your left calf muscle as tightly as you can for 5, 6, 7 seconds, and then you let it out and you relax it for 5 to 10 seconds. And then you tighten up your right calf muscle as tight as you can get. You squeeze as hard as you can get, and then you let it out. And you time those tensing and relaxings with your breathing. And then you work that way all the way up your whole body. And then the very last thing is you tense your entire whole body, head to toes, everything, as hard as you can. And then you time that with a relaxing breath. If you do that, and it's pretty amazing the amount of sinking into whatever you're happen to be sitting in happens. It's a very relaxing process. But through the practice of that transition from tense to relax, I can now do that just simply with one breath and one squeeze of the fist. If I squeeze my fist and breathe, I can have that relaxation effect. And that's what I've learned to do. So these are things that are techniques that are not hard to do, but they do take some practice to do in order to become proficient enough to use them on demand, really wherever it is that you need to use them.
Yeah, it's interesting that. So the New Zealand rugby team, the international rugby team, they're historically one of the best rugby teams that ever was. They used to do something similar, and they trained to program in when they needed to reset. So they called it a red head and a blue head. So once they had the red head, it means they kind of lost their head a little bit and got a bit emotional, or the pressure's got to them a little bit. So they'd all have. And they worked out their own, and they did it with the psychologist, and got to the point where they had their own individual resets. For instance, one of them was just splash some water on his face, and that was him, his trigger. And they got so good at it, they could just that was an instant trigger for them to just switch back on and get right back into the game.
Yeah, I similar thing working with infantry unit with the U.S. Army. They were clearing buildings. I was with them at the National Training Center, which is like the World Cup for units. Before they go deploy, they go to this training event, and it's a big deal. And they were clearing buildings. There was a series of 3 or 4 buildings. And the first time they went through, they were really, really bad. They were very amped up. They were over the top energetic. They were just that nervous energy was coming through. Communication was horrible. They didn't see things. They had tunnel vision. They missed a lot of stuff that was really important. And afterward, the person who was evaluating them said, look, here's what you guys got to do. You need to calm down, and you need to take a tactical pause before you go into each room. Which was excellent advice. I told him, so yeah, that's a great thing. But what the guy didn't tell him was how to calm down or what to do during the tactical pause that would likely be beneficial for them. But we had already talked about some breathing exercises. We talked about cue words and self-talk. And so I said, you remember these things we talked about in this situation? What if you put some, pre-performance routines? What if you put some of this stuff into practice? And what they came up with was, we stack on the door. We say to ourselves, slow is smooth, smooth is fast, because that reminds them to keep their pacing and keep their energy level where it needs to be, and then they'll be able to be smooth and fast. So slow is smooth, smooth is fast. Ready? Big breath in, big breath out, go. And then they'd hit the door, they'd go in, they would clear the building, energy levels amped up again. And then as they would finish up that room, they'd stack on the next door, and they'd do the same thing. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast, right? And what that did is it allowed their energy activation levels to go up in the room to where they needed to be for them to perform well, and then down to reset to that place where they needed to be in order to enter the room, to really take in all of the information they needed to take in. So it's a similar thing that you're talking about. They were able to create a program for themselves that was tailored to them and their unique needs, that allowed them to keep that focus, keep the energy, keep their attention on what it needed to be on. And they did it incredibly well. It was, I've seen performances from first iteration to second iteration that have improved. I don't know that I've ever seen a performance in any environment, be it stunts or whatever. It doesn't even matter. I've never seen anybody improve as much as that unit did. There were four or five guys who it was incredible, the amount of improvement. So it can make a big difference, and it can make a big difference pretty quickly.
Yeah, if you apply yourself to it and you take it seriously, not just kind of, a lot of people pay lip service to these things, whereas actually they are really powerful and effective. And if you, like you say, if you practice it and you work on it, then it can become second nature, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it requires practicing it and working on it. These are skills. All of these things that we're talking about are skills. Like I said before, behavioral habits are developed over time with that same behavior happening regularly. Well, our mental habits are the same way. How we think about things, how we perceive things, what we choose to focus on in different situations, how we talk to ourselves, these are all habits. And to change them takes time. It takes intentional, deliberate effort. It's not necessarily hard. It's pretty simple in principle, but it takes consistent work. It's just like any other skill. I mean, we all have things that we can do now that once upon a time we couldn't do. And how did we get to be able to do it now? Well, we learned it from somebody, and then we practiced it to become proficient, and then we continue to practice it in order to maintain that proficiency. Mental skills are the same way. We get them in that same way. We learn them, we practice them, we implement them, we become good at them, but then we have to keep using them because it's easy to fall out. It's easy to lose those skills once we have them, just like any other skill.
Absolutely. Brian, where can people find you if they want to get in touch with you or they want to learn a bit more about what you do?
Brian Hite Global, BrianHite Global, GLOBAL.com. That's my website. There's a lot of information on there. You can email me at brian@brianhiteglobal.com. And if you do, let me know that you heard me on this podcast, because I'll send you a coupon code for 35% off whatever program you want, whenever you want to get it. And you'll get a free book too. If you put your email address into free book along with a monthly newsletter, if you put your email into the address. You can find me too on social media. I'm on Facebook and Instagram, Brian_Hite23. I'm on LinkedIn, Brian C. Hite. So yeah, you can find me in a lot of different places, and please reach out if you have any questions. If pressure is something that you've struggled with, or consistent performance, and you don't have a mentor who's able to walk you through step by step the process to get you from where you are to where you want to be, please check out the website, give me a shout, and we'll see if one of the programs that I offer is right for you.
Amazing. Brian, thank you so much. Do you have any kind of last thoughts or last final messages that you want to share with anybody?
One thing that it's just, I don't know, it came to mind because this came up the other day. Opportunity is something that a lot of people talk about. And I think about opportunity in a way that's a little bit different from how other people think about it. I think that opportunity comes regularly. I don't think it comes every single day necessarily, but it's also not rare. But I think that there are three things that have to all happen at once in order for us to really take advantage of opportunities when they arise. And that is openness, flexibility, and courage. So openness, we have to be open to the possibility that something good might happen, that an opportunity might come up. We can't be so fixated on whatever direction we've identified that we miss those opportunities when they come up. And we have to be flexible enough to, when we recognize the opportunities, to adapt, to shift, to move, to be willing to let go of what we thought we wanted to do and move in a better direction given what we know now, given our past experiences, given our new knowledge, being able to flex, to recognize that this other path is probably a pretty good one for us. But that knowledge isn't enough either. We also have to have the courage to pursue that new route, to pursue that opportunity, knowing that we may fail. We may not get what we set out to achieve. And that courage needs to come from a place of knowing that either way, whether we pursue this opportunity and it works out great or it doesn't, we're going to be okay. We will grow. We will gain wisdom. We will maybe meet some new people, get some new skills, whatever it is. We will come out of that situation better than we went into it, whether it works out the way we think it's going to and want it to or not. So that's the way I think about opportunity. I think they come regularly, but we have to be open to the possibilities. We have to be flexible enough to shift our goals and our objectives when those opportunities arise. And we have to have the courage to pursue those opportunities, even through uncertainty.
Brian, thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with me today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciated being here.
Thank you. Take care.
Thanks again for being part of this journey. Stay tuned. We've got even more great conversations coming your way.